Mira Patel adjusted the blue therapy vest on her chocolate Labrador, Leo, as they stepped through the automatic doors of Evergreen Children's Hospital. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the lobby, casting geometric patterns across the polished linoleum floors that smelled faintly of antiseptic and floor wax. Leo's nails clicked rhythmically against the tile, his tail wagging in a slow, measured sweep as familiar nurses called out greetings. Unlike some of the more exuberant therapy dogs in the program who bounded from room to room, Leo possessed an almost preternatural ability to calibrate his energy to each child's needs, moving with glacial care around fragile infants, yet transforming into a playful ball of energy for recovering teenagers craving normalcy. Nurse Sarah Daniels met them at the central station, her scrubs wrinkled from a long night shift, a half-empty coffee cup leaving rings on the countertop. "Thank goodness you're here," she said, rubbing at the tension in her temples. "We've got a tough case in room 418. Lucas Carter, 8 years old, admitted 4 days ago with what we thought was severe bronchitis, but he's not responding to treatment." She lowered her voice, leaning in. "His O2 stats keep dipping, and the poor kid can barely keep his eyes open long enough to eat. His mother's been sleeping in that awful recliner every night." Mira felt Leo tense beside her, his nose twitching as if catching a scent. "Any restrictions on visits?" she asked, fingers automatically finding the familiar groove behind Leo's ears that always calmed him. "Officially no," Nurse Daniels said, glancing down the hall, "but Dr. Hartman has been vocal about his objections to the therapy program. Called it sentimental nonsense during rounds yesterday." As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Nathan Hartman rounded the corner, his starched white coat pristine, the silver stethoscope around his neck gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His sharp gray eyes immediately locked onto Leo, and Mira watched his jaw tighten visibly. "Miss Patel," he said in that clipped, precise tone that made interns quake. "I see you've brought the circus act back." Mira forced her professional smile, the one she reserved for particularly difficult parents and administrators. "Good morning, Dr. Hartman. The peer-reviewed studies on animal-assisted therapy show measurable improvements in dash." "Save the sales pitch," he interrupted, adjusting his glasses with a practiced flick of his wrist. "That boy in 418 is fighting for every breath, and I won't have an animal complicating his condition with dander and distractions." His gaze dropped to Leo, who met his stare with quiet dignity. "These children need medicine, not pets." Before Mira could respond, he strode away, his polished loafers squeaking against the floor, leaving behind the faint scent of antibacterial soap and unyielding certainty. The tension lingered as Mira and Leo continued down the hallway, passing rooms filled with the quiet hum of monitors and the occasional burst of childish laughter. Room 418's door stood slightly ajar, and through the gap Mira could see Lucas Carter propped up in bed, looking impossibly small against the sterile white sheets. His skin had the waxy pallor of prolonged illness, dark circles like bruises under his eyes. The oxygen tubes under his nose seemed too large for his face, his chest rising and falling with visible effort. Claire Carter looked up from her vigil in the uncomfortable recliner, her red-rimmed eyes brightening slightly at the sight of Leo. "Oh," she breathed, setting aside the tattered magazine she'd been pretending to read. "You must be the therapy dog team. Lucas heard about you from the boy across the hall." Mira entered slowly, giving Leo the quiet command to approach. "This is Leo," she said softly. "He's very good at knowing just what kids need." Leo moved toward the bed with his characteristic gentle grace, his tail waving slowly like a metronome. But as he neared Lucas, something remarkable happened. The dog froze mid-step, his entire body locking into perfect stillness. His nostrils flared, his ears pricked forward at an unnatural angle. Then, with deliberate care, he pressed his nose against Lucas's left side, just below the ribs, and let out a soft, urgent whine that vibrated through the quiet room. Myra's breath caught in her throat. In their 3 years and hundreds of visits together, Leo had never once broken protocol like this. "Leo, heel," she commanded, her voice firmer now. The dog ignored her completely, his focus laser-sharp on that one spot on Lucas's thin chest. His tail, usually a reliable indicator of his calm demeanor, hung stiff and motionless. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Is he supposed to do that?" Mira knelt beside Leo, running her hands over his back, feeling the unusual tension in his muscles. "No," she admitted quietly. "He's not." Over the next 3 visits, Leo's behavior grew increasingly insistent. Each time they entered room 418, he made a beeline for Lucas, zeroing in on that same spot with unnerving precision. He would whine deep in his throat, a sound Mira had never heard before, and paw gently at the hospital sheets as if trying to dig through to something beneath. Lucas, despite his weakness, always managed a small smile for Leo, his pale fingers stroking the dog's head with obvious affection. "He knows," the boy whispered during their third visit, his voice raspy from coughing. "He knows it hurts right here." His small hand fluttered to his left side. Dr. Hartman's reaction was predictably scathing. "That animal is a distraction at best and a biohazard at worst," he snapped when Mira attempted to explain Leo's behavior outside the nurse's station. His pen tapped an impatient rhythm against the clipboard he carried. "Lucas Carter needs rest and proper medical treatment, not a dog sniffing at him like he's a damn fire hydrant." But Mira couldn't shake the growing conviction that Leo was trying to communicate something vital. That night, after her shift, she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by medical journals and printed studies, the glow of her laptop casting long shadows in the dark apartment. The research was compelling. Documented cases of dogs detecting ovarian cancer through scent before any clinical symptoms appeared, canines alerting to impending seizures minutes before they occurred, even trained medical dogs that could identify dangerously low blood sugar in diabetic patients. What if Leo wasn't being disobedient? What if he was smelling something no test had caught yet? The next morning, she intercepted Dr. Rachel Bennett, Lucas's attending physician, in the break room as the doctor gulped what had to be her third coffee of the morning. Dark circles matched the ones under Lucas's eyes. "Dr. Bennett," Mira began carefully, "I know this sounds unbelievable, but I think Leo might be detecting something in Lucas's left lung. Something the tests aren't showing." Bennett sighed, stirring her coffee absently. The spoon clinked against the ceramic like a tiny alarm bell. "Mira, I respect what you do, really. But we've run every test in our arsenal: complete blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel, chest x-rays, CT scan. It's bronchitis. A severe case, yes, but textbook otherwise." "But what if dash? What if nothing?" Bennett interrupted, though not unkindly. She rubbed at her eyes. "Dogs are amazing creatures, but they're not magic. They're not replacement for imaging technology." Mira left the break room with frustration simmering in her chest. As she passed room 418, she heard a coughing fit erupt, deep, wet, and painfully violent. Claire's voice, tight with panic, called for help. And then Leo, normally the picture of canine composure, let out a sharp, piercing bark that echoed down the hallway like a gunshot. What followed was a blur of controlled chaos. Dr. Bennett, despite her skepticism, ordered an emergency high-resolution CT scan after Leo's unprecedented outburst. The imaging team worked with unusual haste, the normally bustling radiology department falling silent as the images loaded on the screens. When the results came in, the medical team gathered in hushed conference outside Lucas's room. Dr. Bennett's face was ashen as she showed Mira the films. There, nestled in the lower lobe of Lucas's left lung, was a fungal abscess about the size of a walnut, its edges blurred by the surrounding inflammation from the bronchitis. It had been completely obscured on previous scans. "If we'd waited any longer?" Bennett trailed off, her fingers trembling slightly against the films. The unspoken conclusion hung heavy between them. The abscess had been on the verge of rupturing, which could have flooded Lucas's lung cavity with infection, likely leading to sepsis. Emergency surgery was scheduled immediately. The fungal culture came back as aspergillus, a particularly aggressive strain that explained Lucas's resistance to standard antibiotics. Targeted antifungals and careful drainage of the abscess marked the turning point in his recovery. In the weeks that followed, Evergreen Hospital quietly implemented sweeping changes to their therapy animal policies. Leo was given an honorary badge, his photo displayed in the staff lounge with the caption, "Our silent guardian when instinct outpaces technology." The administration initiated a pilot program training therapy dog handlers to recognize and report unusual alert behaviors, with protocols for escalating concerns to medical staff. Dr. Hartman never offered an outright apology, but Mira noticed he stopped objecting to Leo's visits. More tellingly, she once caught him reviewing a study on canine olfaction detection thresholds in his office, his brow furrowed in thought. As for Lucas, on the day of his discharge, he knelt beside Leo in the hospital lobby, his small arms wrapped as far as they could go around the dog's sturdy neck. "You're my hero," he whispered into the soft fur behind Leo's ears. The dog responded by licking a broad stripe up the side of Lucas's face, making the boy giggle, a sound his mother later confessed she hadn't heard in weeks. Mira watched them, her hand resting lightly on Leo's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Some truths, she reflected, didn't need studies or scans or peer-reviewed journals to prove their validity. Some truths were written in the unshakable certainty of a dog's instinct, in the silent language between species that sometimes understood illness better than medicine itself. And as Leo leaned into Lucas's touch, his tail sweeping the floor in calm, even strokes, Mira knew this truth with absolute certainty. They had been witness to something extraordinary, something that blurred the lines between science and instinct, between medicine and miracles.